Howdy again, it's Tubalcain, and in this video, which is a continuation of the last video regarding the brake on the spindle here, and that project was a total failure, so I'm on to another possibility here, and this one's going to work, I know it is, but I showed you this in the last video. This is a cable out of my Oldsmobile, and I'm going to make it pedal operated with the cable going clear up to the brake, but this was the old hood release off of an Oldsmobile, but it's only 6 foot long, and that's too short. I had a heck of a time finding a longer cable because all the throttle cables and things that they sell, you know, at farm stores, they're all 6 foot or less. Well, I needed a longer one. So anyway, I went up to see my buddies in Leland, and if you haven't watched this video, make sure you do. Tubalcain takes a field trip for the disassembling of America. It's quite sad, but yet it has enjoyed tremendous viewership, so take a look at that. But I went back to see those guys. I said, I need a cable. Do you have any cable? Well, Tom did. He said, well, come on in the back room, and he had a box full of cables, but primarily throttle type cable. But I said, well, what's this? Well, it's a Renault part, so I dumped it out on the floor, and sure enough, it's about 8 foot long, and I think it's probably a parking brake cable or something like that, but very well built, and it's got some nice ends on it, and it's got a clevis on one end. But I simply must stop and rant here a little bit and tell you a little story about my Renault Dauphine car. When I got out of high school, my second car, my first car was a 38 Plymouth, but then I bought for $250 a 1957 Renault Dauphine. Now, I always called it a Renault, but my mother said, honey, it's not Renault, it's Renault. That's the way the French pronounce it, Renault. I said, oh, well, I didn't believe her. You know, you can't tell a teenager or anything. So anyway, that was the worst car of my life. I've never had a car, and I'm sorry you guys over there in France, and this took place in 1962, and that car had low mileage on it. There was nothing that worked on it. We take for granted that the windshield wipers will work here in America, and that the window will roll up. We take for granted that the heater will work, and that the car will start. None of the above were true with my Renault. So that's why I'm ranting, because I'm still mad at them. And that's 50 years ago that they could have built the car that poorly with no functionality. I had to push start it most of the time, but it was so lightweight it was rather easy to do. And I could start it like you start a motorcycle, push it a little bit and jump on it. Sorry I ranted so much, but that's my Renault story. Now on with the milling machine. This cable is heavier than that throttle or that hood or trunk cable. Looks like it's about 1/8 inch. I'm sure it's in metric. We've got a nice clevis here. We even got the little bellows. Now I've got about 7 foot here of the shield, but got at least a foot on this end to play with. So if I put my bracket back here, I'm going to have a cable that is long enough, and this is a metric thread. I already checked that out, 6mm. I found some nuts for that. So let me talk now about the pedal that I'm going to use. And I showed you this in one of my other videos, and that's originally what I was going to use, but that isn't going to cut it. Sterling, I don't know what that's off of. I like the looks of it though. Alright, let's step over to the bench and I'll show you what I got. Be sure and watch part 1 of this video or you will not know at all what I'm talking about. But this is the slave cylinder and the pump, and I just took them off the mill, and I'll take the fittings off these, and this belongs to my brother. This one I'm going to throw away. I'm sick of the whole thing. But why didn't it not work, you ask? Well, it was all about, first of all, the air would compress. It would compress in here and here and in the tubing, and it didn't deliver the full pressure here to what I had hoped for. That it would, you know, just pull with, you know, 10 or 20 pounds of force. That didn't work at all. especially after the second or third day that I came down. This had bled, and there was a lack of air in there. That is, this was almost all the way down. And then that's why I put this valve in there, was to allow air to return into this so that I could bring this back out. But it was all too much trouble and a failure. So I'm done with that. Let's talk about the cable again. This is the pedal. So when I first start a project like this, I make a few sketches, but they're pretty crude, and then I make one to scale, and I cut it out. This is just paper. Sometimes I use cardboard or wood. This was number 1, and I changed some dimensions and made it a little thinner, and then I decided, well, that's what I'm going to make out of steel, and we'll see how it works, and I hope it does. And there it is, out of steel. Saw it out. Well, that took about an hour to make. And I got extra holes here on the top, so if I do not like the placement of the cable, I can move it up or down. Also have the option for drilling some more holes here if I need to. And this is where my foot will push down. So I'll put a little pad out there eventually when I get my welder out, something like this across there to push on, although this would work. I might need a spring under here to return it. I don't know yet. I just work my way through things like this, the same as you guys do. And I have to make a little bracket so this will pivot on the bottom of the machine. And I did calculate here, by tacking this onto a piece of wood, that I would have at least an inch of travel here, and the leverage of this extra long piece. So I think that's going to work, but time will tell. 3 or 4 days have passed since the last film clip, and I have completed the job, and I have not documented the step-by-step procedure that I used to do this, but let me show you the finished results, and it works too good to be true. Now watch the brake handle as I push the foot pedal, which is not in the video, but I can still use this by hand if I have a notion. It does not disable it for hand use. But watch this now as I push repeatedly on the pedal. Hands free. I love it. Alright, let's look what I did here now. And again, that's the cable from the Renault parts department. And I used the original clevis that was on it right here, and it's just attached onto the, I had to drill it out and bend it a little bit, and then tighten the knob around it, and I have the spring attached to that, and I'll show you that from the other side here in a minute. And here's the cable itself, routed really through and behind this bolt here, and then I did have to make a clamp. There's just one screw that's drilled and tapped, so I did have to drill a couple holes, but there's one hole there. I know it looks like a bit of a sharp bend there, but it's not too bad. Then the cable goes down, around and behind, and then I'll show you from the other side here in a second. Now you say, well, that's going to interfere with you tilting the head, and I'm sure it will. But I very seldom tilt the head, and I'll deal with it at that time. I do not like the look at all from the front here with that spring, and I tried all kinds of different springs, and I have an entire arsenal of springs. I probably got 1,000 of them in stock, but I did have to drill and tap a 1024 hole here and use this spring that's attached to that clevis that I just mentioned. Now watch it from this side as I depress the pedal. And it always returns to the neutral position here, indicated by that marker line that I have temporarily on there, so that the brake is not dragging. From this side you can see the cable coming down. Working its way down to this anchor. Quite fortuitously, there was already a drilled and tapped hole right here that I was able to use, and here's the cable. And I made a slot in this little angle iron bracket that I made. So it's firmly in there. And watch this now as I press the pedal again. Pretty nifty, huh? And then over here, finally, is the pedal itself. That, of course, is what I showed you. I was making the pattern for it. And down here is a bracket made out of aluminum. I'll show you another view of that. I might put some of that 3M tread on there that's kind of like you use in bathtubs, if I have any around here. Not that there's any need. Again, here's the pedal. I had to make this clevis and cut off about an inch off of this threaded Renault part. This is so much better than that failure pneumatic system that I originally did. So that's it. As simple as it looks, you know, I got probably 4, 5, 6 hours into this, plus thinking about it for over 10 years. And again, the whole reason for doing this was so I didn't drop my valuable items such as my boring head, my German Albrecht chuck, or my coaxial indicator, because there's a tendency, and I've explained this before, that if you got one hand on the brake and one hand on the wrench up top side as you loosen it, this can fall, and it has fallen. So sometimes I'd put a rag or a glove under there to protect it, but now the problem is solved, and let me take this out. And the heavier the piece of tooling, the more likely it is to slide out as you tighten the collet. It usually doesn't happen with a little end mill that has no weight to it. Now watch this as I remove the boring head, and here's my wrench, and I'll have one hand up on the top side with the wrench, my foot on the pedal, and my left hand on the tool here so I don't drop it. So I've depressed the brake, and there it is. And that's the whole purpose of doing that. And I think I'm going to like it, but I got to get used to using it, because I think the initial reaction is for me to want to put my hand back up on the handbrake. So, after all this time and all that work, I've solved the problem, I think. I don't expect anybody to do this, but you might find this of interest, because you're not going to find one of these cables like I showed you. But on eBay you might find other cables, and I noticed in looking through eBay that there were cables for outboard motors. I think throttle cables or control cables. There were 8-footers, but often they were $40 or $50. So that completes this video on my brake for the Bridgeport, but I had to laugh again as I get ready to throw this bag away now because I'm done with the job. I suppose that's the part number there. But it says Renault parts the world over, but believe me, in 1962 there weren't any parts the world over for my Renault Dauphine. So this is Tubalcain saying hope you enjoyed this little adventure. And watch my other videos. Thanks for watching, and so long for now.